Hello everyone, I am Amin. Welcome to BYK Book Summary. Here we decide the mindset and story of the world's most successful icon and the most powerful books that saved them. Our mission is to bring you deep insight, your personal growth, joining me to simplify this concept is my AI research co-host. Let's dive into today's journey of knowledge.
Today, we are exploring a really massive stack of notes and research.
Yeah, it's a lot of material today.
It is, and it's centered around one of the most, well, I'd say profound psychological texts ever written, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Right.
But we're cross-referencing it with something totally unexpected, the business and investing philosophy of the late billionaire Charlie Munger.
Which, on the surface sounds like a really bizarre pairing.
Exactly. But our mission today is to figure out what happens when absolutely everything is taken from you, and how that exact baseline survival mechanism actually drives modern high performance and success.
Yeah.
But to start, I want to pose a theoretical question to you, to the listener.
Okay.
Imagine stripping a high-performance engine down to its absolute core. You remove the turbocharger, you drain the high-octane fuel.
Right, take away the oxygen intake.
Yeah, you disconnect all the external power sources.
Mm.
What is the internal spark that actually keeps it running? Like when you take away everything that makes it go fast, what is the fundamental mechanism that simply keeps it going at all?
You're basically trying to locate the absolute baseline of operation.
Exactly.
Because in any complex system, whether it's, a mechanical engine or human psychology, there is a foundation.
Right.
And without it, you don't just experience a drop in performance, you lose the system entirely. It just becomes an inert piece of metal.
And usually, when we talk about high performance or resilience or success, we're talking about the fuel.
Oh, totally. We talk about productivity hacks.
Yeah, motivation or optimizing your morning routine or tweaking your diet.
It's all about adding things on top to make the engine run better, faster.
More efficiently.
Right. Which is, an additive approach. It assumes the engine is already running perfectly and just needs a chemical boost to win the race.
Yeah.
But that approach fails completely when the track is destroyed and the fuel is gone.
Right. Which brings us to the core of our deep dive today. This isn't about cheap productivity hacks. It is not about superficial motivation.
No, not at all.
We're going to connect the absolute darkest chapter of human history, which is the Nazi concentration camps, directly to the high-performance, intensely practical wisdom of Charlie Munger.
Yeah, we're trying to answer the ultimate question of human existence.
When everything is violently taken from you.
Yeah.
Your name, your clothes,
Your family.
your future. What is the one thing that remains?
It's the ultimate stress test of the human condition.
Yeah.
And the answers we'll be pulling from Frankl's work and Munger's application of it, they provide something that is as profound as it is intensely practical.
Right.
This isn't just historical reflection. It's an operational manual for the human mind when the environment goes to absolute zero.
So to understand this spark that drives ultimate survival, and as we'll see, elite performance, we have to start by looking at the man who dedicated his life to defining it.
Viktor Frankl.
Right. And the fascinating thing is he was trying to define this spark long before he was ever put to the ultimate test. He was born in Vienna in 1905.
And Vienna at that specific time was, it was the absolute epicenter of psychological thought.
Yeah.
It was like the Silicon Valley of the human mind. You had the undisputed giants of the field literally walking those streets, defining how humanity understood itself.
And Frankl from childhood just had this profound innate interest in how the mind worked. At just 16 years old, he wrote a letter to Sigmund Freud.
Freud, the king of psychoanalysis.
Right. A 16-year-old kid writes to him with his own original psychological theories.
And Freud didn't just, write a polite reply to humor a teenager.
No.
He recognized the sheer, undeniable brilliance in Frankl's letter. Freud actually arranged for Frankl's paper to be published the very next year in the International Journal of Psychoanalysis.
Which is wild. It's like a high school kid emailing Albert Einstein and Einstein saying, actually, let's get this published in a physics journal.
Exactly. It establishes Frankl right out of the gate as an absolute prodigy.
Yeah. He goes on to study medicine, then psychiatry.
Yeah.
But this is where the clash of the psychological titans really begins.
Right.
Because Frankl didn't just fall in line with the establishment.
He couldn't. He looked at the dominant theories of the day and found them, well, fundamentally lacking in their ability to explain the entirety of the human experience.
Right?
Let's look at the intellectual landscape he was stepping into. You had Sigmund Freud, who built his entire framework on the idea that humans are fundamentally driven by the pleasure principle.
Okay, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain.
Exactly. That, to Freud, was the core engine of human behavior. Every neurosis, every drive, it all boiled down to trying to satisfy these deep, often unconscious urges for pleasure.
And then you had Alfred Adler, right? Another massive figure in Vienna.
Yeah.
And Adler looked at human behavior and said, no, Freud is wrong. We aren't fundamentally driven by pleasure. We are driven by power.
The pursuit of superiority.
Yeah. Status, control over our environment and over others. Adler believed that overcoming our inherent feelings of inferiority through gaining power was the real engine.
So you have the pleasure principle versus the power principle.
Right.
And then young Viktor Frankl steps into the arena and just rejects both of them.
Wow.
He argues that if you look closely enough at human behavior, especially in extreme conditions, neither pleasure nor power is the ultimate driver.
Okay.
He developed an entirely new school of psychological thought called logotherapy, from the Greek word logos, which means purpose or meaning.
Meaning.
Right. Frankl's radical belief was that human beings are primarily driven by the search for meaning.
He argued that pleasure and power are actually secondary byproducts.
Right.
Like, they might be things we chase when we are empty, but the primary, deepest drive of the human condition is to find a why to our existence.
So precisely. If you find meaning, you might experience pleasure as a byproduct.
Yeah.
You might gain power or status as a byproduct of pursuing a meaningful goal. But if you chase pleasure or power directly as the primary goal, Frankl argued, you will ultimately end up hollow.
Wait, let me stop you there for a second, because
Yeah.
I really want to break this down mechanically.
Sure.
Power actually feels like a great insulator. Like, if I'm a CEO or a wealthy investor, I have the power to protect myself from a lot of everyday pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can buy my way out of inconvenience. I can control my schedule. So are you saying Adler's power principle is completely useless? Or just that it has a breaking point?
That's a really crucial distinction. It's not that power or pleasure are useless, it's that they are fundamentally fragile.
Fragile.
Yes. They are entirely dependent on your external circumstances remaining favorable.
Okay.
Let's look at the mechanics of it. If your entire psychological drive is based on pleasure, what happens when your body breaks down and you experience chronic pain? The pleasure disappears. If that was your only fuel, your psychological engine stalls out completely.
And the same applies to power.
Exactly. If you are driven by status, by control, by that power principle, what happens when a massive macroeconomic shift destroys your industry?
Yeah.
What happens when you are unceremoniously fired? The power is gone overnight, the external environment changed, and it took your internal drive with it.
Wow.
Both pleasure and power evaporate the moment the environment turns against you. They require specific external conditions to exist.
I see. So think about your own career for a second. Like, to you listening right now, when you wake up on a Monday morning, what is actually getting you out of bed?
Yeah, that's the question.
Are you chasing the pleasure of a paycheck? Are you chasing the power of a specific title on your LinkedIn profile? Because Frankl argues that neither of those will sustain you.
No, they won't.
If you hit a genuine crisis,
Yeah.
a recession, a major industry shift, a personal setback, the pleasure of the paycheck and the power of the title vanish.
Right.
Meaning, however, is the only drive that is entirely internally generated. It is anti-fragile.
It is the spark that does not need external oxygen. It functions independently of the environment.
Okay, that makes sense conceptually. But, debating psychological theory in a warm, comfortable classroom in Vienna is one thing.
Yeah, it's easy to talk about.
You can hypothesize about meaning versus pleasure all day long over a cup of coffee. But Frankl's theory was about to be violently, horrifyingly forced into the most brutal testing ground ever conceived.
The theories needed a stress test, and history was about to provide the ultimate one.
In 1942, Nazi Germany tightened its absolute grip on Austria, and Frankl's reality was shattered overnight. He, his brilliant medical career, and his entire family were deported. They were shoved into the nightmare machinery of the Holocaust, first to Theresienstadt, then to Auschwitz, and then to Kaufering.
We really have to pause and genuinely acknowledge the sheer unfathomable scale of the loss here.
We do.
It's too easy to read historical accounts as abstract statistics, but this was a man's entire universe being systematically obliterated. Frankl was the sole survivor of his family.
God.
His mother, his father, his brother, and his young pregnant wife, they all perished in those camps.
It's just unimaginable grief. A total, absolute stripping away of every single thing that gave his life structure, joy, pleasure, or power.
Yeah.
He is left with absolutely nothing but his own mind. He is stripped of his identity, his clothes, his hair, his name. He just becomes a number tattooed on his arm.
Yeah.
And yet, this absolute zero environment is where he makes his core discovery.
Because the physical reality of the camps was designed to extinguish human dignity. Humans were reduced to their most primitive state.
Right.
Just waking up every single morning in the freezing cold to perform brutal, back-breaking labor, existing on a few hundred calories a day of watery soup and stale bread, rampant disease. And hovering over all of this was the constant, immediate threat of the gas chambers for anyone who became too weak to work.
Right. And if you were an outsider looking at that environment, if you were trying to mathematically calculate who would survive, you would assume it was purely a game of physical thermodynamics.
Sure.
You would assume the youngest, the biggest, the most physically robust people, the physical titans, would be the ones who survived the longest.
It's a completely logical assumption. If it's a test of physical endurance, caloric deficit, and manual labor, the physically strongest biological machines should win.
But that is not what happened. Frankl, observing this not just as a prisoner, but as a deeply trained psychiatrist trapped inside the nightmare, noticed a mathematical paradox.
Yeah.
The physical titans were not necessarily the ones mentally or physically surviving. In fact, they were often the ones who broke down first.
Right.
The survivors, the people who managed to keep going, who maintained a shred of their humanity, were the ones who had a reason.
A purpose. Something or someone waiting for them on the outside. An unfinished task. A loved one.
Yes, and I want to dive deep into a specific anecdote Frankl shares, because it explains the exact physiological and psychological mechanism of this.
It's a powerful story.
Frankl is marching out to a work site. It is a bitter, freezing morning. The guards are beating him. He is physically exhausted, starving, completely broken down, stumbling in the snow. He is in severe caloric deficit and likely experiencing early hypothermia. And in that moment of absolute physical devastation, he conjures an image of his wife.
And remember, at this point, he doesn't even know if she's still alive.
He has no idea. But her image appears in his mind with total crystal clarity. They have a conversation in his mind. He sees her smile. He hears her voice.
Wow.
And in that specific moment, shivering in the freezing cold, a neurochemical override happens. He realizes that love, even for someone who may no longer be alive, can sustain the human spirit when absolutely nothing else can.
Right.
It wasn't the calories in his stomach that kept his legs moving. He didn't have any calories. It was the meaning he found in that love that forced his biological system to keep pushing forward.
Let's break down the mechanics of what you just called a neurochemical override. Because when the body is in that state of extreme deprivation, the brain's default setting is to shut down to conserve energy. That's why the physical titans often fell. When their brute strength ran out, they had no secondary power source. Their brain signaled, we are out of fuel, shut the system down.
Yeah.
But Frankl's brain, operating on the fuel of meaning, overrode that biological shutdown sequence. The purpose, the why, literally altered the physical limits of what his body could endure.
It's like putting a building through a simulated earthquake. You know those massive shake tables structural engineers use to test skyscrapers?
Oh, yeah. To find the catastrophic failure points in the materials.
Exactly. Except this was a real-life horrific test, and it was testing the human architecture.
Yeah.
What Frankl witnessed was that the structure that held up wasn't the one made of the thickest concrete.
No.
It wasn't physical strength or brute force. The structure that survived the earthquake was the one with the deepest, most unshakable foundation. And that foundation was purpose.
And what's really crucial here is that Frankl didn't just observe this as some mystical, unexplainable phenomenon. As a scientist, he analyzed it. He asked a highly practical question. Since a deep sense of purpose was the only thing that survived this absolute zero environment, how do we actually construct that purpose?
Right, because we need to know how to do it.
Exactly. Because if meaning is the ultimate survival tool, we need to know the engineering schematics for how to manufacture it.
Right. He didn't just leave it at find your purpose. That's too vague. He broke it down.
Yeah.
He created a defined system which he called the architecture of meaning. Logotherapy teaches that there are 3 specific pillars for finding meaning. 3 ways to build that foundation. Let's walk through them because this applies to everyone listening right now.
The first pillar is through work. But let's be precise. He doesn't mean just clocking in and out for a wage.
Right.
The paycheck is just the pleasure principle. He means creating something, contributing something of unique value to the world. It's a meaning found in the act of creation itself. That could be building a business, writing a book, painting a canvas, or raising a child. It's the profound act of putting something into the world that simply would not exist if you were not there to create it.
Okay, contribution. I give something to the world. The second pillar is through experience or encounter.
Yeah, if the first pillar is what we output, the second pillar is about what we take in from the world.
Got it.
It's experiencing love just as he did with the memory of his wife in the snow. It's experiencing profound beauty, being moved by a piece of art, standing in awe of nature, or experiencing deep, genuine human connection.
Yeah.
It's the meaning that comes from simply being fully present and encountering the richness of life or the depth of another human soul. It's realizing the world is vast and being a witness to it.
Output and input. But it's pillar 3 where things get intensely difficult. And this is the one we really need to spend time on.
Definitely.
The third pillar is finding meaning through attitude. Specifically, the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering.
This is, without a doubt, the most radical and challenging part of Frankl's entire philosophy. Finding meaning in creating a great piece of art or falling in love, that's intuitive. But finding meaning in suffering, that requires a complete structural paradigm shift in how we view existence.
Well, I'd actually argue it sounds a bit dangerous if misunderstood.
How so?
Isn't this just toxic positivity? Like, are we telling people to just smile through a tragedy? If someone is going through intense grief or they just got diagnosed with a terrible illness, telling them to find the meaning feels almost dismissive.
That's a vital pushback, and
Right.
Frankl is incredibly surgically explicit about this distinction. He is emphatically not promoting toxic positivity.
Okay.
He is very clear. If suffering can be avoided, it absolutely must be avoided. If you have a headache, take an aspirin. If you are in a toxic, abusive job, quit. If a situation can be changed through action, change it. There is absolutely no meaning in unnecessary suffering. Tolerating avoidable pain isn't noble, it's masochism.
Okay, so he's drawing a hard line. What happens when we cross that line?
What he is talking about is when suffering is absolutely fundamentally unavoidable.
With an incurable illness.
Yes, an incurable terminal illness. The sudden, irreversible loss of a loved one. Being trapped in a concentration camp. When the external suffering cannot be changed, when all avenues of escape are closed, he says that finding meaning within your response to it is the only thing that makes it bearable.
To ground this, Frankl relied heavily on a quote by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how.
That's a brilliant quote.
Let's break that down mechanically. How does the why change the how?
It reframes our entire understanding of human endurance. We tend to think of our endurance or how as a fixed metric, like I can handle X amount of pain before I break.
Right.
But Nietzsche and Frankl are saying that limit is entirely elastic. Your endurance expands or contracts based entirely on the strength of your why.
Wow.
If your why is weak, if you are just living for comfort, a minor inconvenience, like a delayed flight, will break your composure. If your why is absolute, like protecting your child or honoring your own dignity, you can survive the abyss. The why acts as a multiplier for the how.
But where is the meaning actually located? Like if there's a fatal car crash or a devastating financial collapse, there is no inherent cosmic meaning in those events. The event itself is just chaotic suffering.
Exactly. The meaning isn't in the tragedy. Frankl's genius is where he locates the meaning. It's entirely within your own unassailable agency.
Agency.
Yes. It is found in how you choose to bear the burden. It is the dignity with which you handle the catastrophe. It is the example you set for others in how to stand tall when the world collapses.
Right.
Frankl realized that even when you are stripped of every single external freedom, when you cannot change the situation by even 1 millimeter, you still retain the ultimate, final internal freedom. The ability to choose your attitude. That choice itself is the meaning.
The meaning isn't, I am suffering because the universe has a grand plan. The meaning is, I am suffering, but I am going to choose to endure this with dignity. And that conscious choice is my victory over the suffering.
That is the exact mechanism. And this fundamental choice of attitude leads directly into the most chilling and perhaps most important observation Frankl made about human psychology in the camps.
Okay.
It leads us to the absolute fatal danger of the victim mentality.
Yes. Frankl observed a distinct pattern among the prisoners. He noted that the people who broke fastest in the camps, the ones who lost the will to live, who quickly succumbed to illness, who literally just gave up and died, were specifically those who fell into a victim mentality.
Let's define what a victim mentality actually meant in that extreme context. These were people who believed that fate had placed them there and that they had absolutely zero agency whatsoever.
Yeah.
They believed the environment was 100% in control of their destiny, their feelings, and their future. They surrendered entirely to the external circumstances.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
In a concentration camp, the external circumstances are completely controlling your physical reality. You are a victim of a horrific regime.
Physically, yes, they were victims. But psychologically, adopting the identity of a helpless victim, surrendering that last inch of inner agency, was fatal.
Oh, I see.
The moment they believed they had no choice in how to react, they died internally, their psychological engines stopped. And shortly after, their physical bodies followed suit.
I want to try an analogy here to explain the psychological mechanism, because it's not just about giving up.
Okay.
The victim mentality is essentially a cognitive energy-saving mode. It's like your brain tripping a circuit breaker.
Oh, that's interesting.
When the external environment is too overwhelming, the brain says, if I convince myself I have zero control, I don't have to expend the terrifying, agonizing energy required to make a choice or maintain hope.
Wow.
It's a biological defense mechanism designed to numb the pain of responsibility, but it ultimately kills the host.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The circuit breaker trips, shutting down the power to save the system from an overload, but in doing so, it turns off life support.
Right.
Contrast that with the survivors. The people who survived maintained some sense of inner choice, even if that choice was entirely confined to how they thought about their situation.
Yeah.
Even if their only agency was deciding to give away their last piece of bread to someone who needed it more, or choosing to comfort a dying stranger. That tiny, almost invisible act of agency was a radical rejection of the victim mentality. It was keeping the circuit breaker engaged.
There is a quote from Frankl that is perhaps the most important sentence he ever wrote.
What is it?
He said, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances."
To choose one's attitude. That is the absolute core of proactive agency.
And if we bring this out of history and into the modern world, this is a massive structural lesson for modern careers in high performance.
We really have to bridge that gap, because you, listening to this, you might be wondering, how does surviving a death camp connect to surviving a corporate restructuring or a market crash?
Well, the underlying psychological mechanics are identical. In any career, in any business, uncontrollable things happen.
Always.
Macroeconomic environments change.
Yeah.
Entire industries are wiped out by new technology. Unfair layoffs occur. A global pandemic shuts down your supply chain overnight.
Yeah.
You absolutely do not control the external environment. Bad things happen that are not your fault.
Exactly. But if you allow your brain's circuit breaker to trip, if you fall into a victim mentality and say, well, the market is bad, my boss is unfair, the system is rigged, there's nothing I can do, you're actively destroying your own agency.
Yeah.
You are doing to yourself exactly what the prisoners who broke fastest did. You are surrendering the only tool you have left.
Right.
Proactive agency, the conscious, deliberate choice of your response to terrible circumstances, is the ultimate requirement for navigating chaos.
Let's use a driving metaphor.
Yes.
Imagine you're driving on a highway at 60 miles an hour, and suddenly you hit a massive patch of black ice.
Terrifying. You instantly lose all traction. The car is sliding.
The situation is completely out of your control.
Yeah.
You didn't put the ice there.
Yeah.
You can't control the laws of physics that are currently making your car slide toward a ditch.
Right.
The victim mentality is like taking your hands completely off the steering wheel, closing your eyes and saying, well, I hit ice. It's out of my control. Fate is going to decide what happens now.
Which absolutely guarantees a catastrophic crash.
100%. Letting go of the wheel guarantees destruction. Proactive agency is recognizing, okay, I don't control the ice. I am sliding, but I still control the steering wheel.
Yes.
I still control where my eyes are looking. I still control how I modulate the brakes. You might still hit the guardrail. You might still take damage. But keeping your hands firmly on the wheel is your only mathematical chance of survival.
That is exactly it. And this concept that keeping your hands on the wheel of your own agency is the ultimate determinant of survival is exactly why this book isn't just taught in philosophy or psychology classes.
Where else is it taught?
It's taught in boardrooms. If proactive agency and a deep why are the fundamental keys to navigating chaos, it starts to make sense why the most ruthless analytical minds in modern capitalism became obsessed with it.
Wow, yeah.
Surviving Auschwitz and surviving a massive market collapse rely on the exact same human operating system.
Which brings us to the fascinating pivot in our deep dive today. We are moving from the horrors of the 1940s to the apex of modern high performance and capital allocation. We are bringing in billionaire investor Charlie Munger.
Yeah. For those who might not be familiar, Charlie Munger was the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway.
Right.
He was Warren Buffett's right-hand man for decades. Munger was widely considered one of the sharpest, most rational, and most successful minds in the history of business and investing. He wasn't a philosopher. He was a highly pragmatic capitalist.
And yet, Charlie Munger placed Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning on his personal, highly curated top 10 reading list.
Which should make anyone stop dead in their tracks and pay attention.
Seriously.
When one of the greatest capital allocators in human history tells you a harrowing memoir about a concentration camp is essential reading for understanding business, you have to ask why.
Right. Why? It's not a business book. There are no balance sheets in it. There's no advice on evaluating discounted cash flow or competitive moats. So why did Munger value it so highly?
Because Munger's legendary investing mind was not built just on studying math or finance. He always said that finance is just a tiny subset of worldly wisdom.
Okay.
His success was built on studying human behavior, psychology, and history. Munger understood a fundamental, undeniable truth. Businesses are not spreadsheets.
Right.
Markets are not just charts on a terminal screen. Businesses and markets are just massive, complex collections of human beings making decisions under pressure.
So to understand the business, you have to completely understand the human operating system running it.
Exactly. Understanding what drives people at their absolute core is the foundation of understanding businesses, markets, and decision-making.
Wow.
If you don't understand human motivation, you cannot accurately price a stock, you cannot evaluate a management team, and you certainly cannot build a resilient company.
And what Munger took from Frankl was this ultimate truth about motivation. Munger distilled this into a brilliant business philosophy. He said, the best businesses give people meaningful work, not just paychecks. Meaning...
Let's unpack the hard business mechanics of that. Why is meaning an actual quantifiable competitive advantage for a business?
Okay, yeah. Let's look at the math of meaning.
Think about Frankl's findings. If a human being is driven primarily by meaning, then a company that provides meaning is tapping into the deepest, most resilient power source available.
It's plugging directly into the main reactor rather than relying on, AA batteries.
Precisely. Let's contrast two hypothetical companies. Company A operates purely on Freud's pleasure principle.
Okay.
They motivate their employees entirely through bonuses, perks, and high salaries.
Pretty standard.
Right. Now, Company B operates on Frankl's meaning principle. They pay fairly, but their core driver is a shared mission. Let's say they are revolutionizing clean energy or providing vital health care. They are giving their employees Pillar 1, meaningful work and contribution.
Okay, so what happens when stress enters the system?
Exactly. When times are good, both companies do fine. But what happens during a severe recession?
Right.
Company A can't pay out bonuses that year. What do the employees do? The pleasure is gone, so their engine stops. They immediately start looking for a competitor who can pay a bonus. Company A experiences massive turnover, loss of institutional knowledge, and high hiring costs.
The structural integrity fails.
Yes, but Company B, they also hit a rough patch. But because their employees are glued together by a shared meaning, by the belief that their work matters to the world, they stay and fight. They endure the how of the recession because their why is strong. They accept the pay freeze to keep the mission alive. That low turnover, that high employee agency directly translates to lower operational friction, better problem solving, and a massively wider economic moat.
That's incredible.
Meaning, build stronger cultures precisely because meaning is the deepest human need.
That is a profound business insight. If you are Munger analyzing a business you might want to invest in, or if you are a manager looking at your own team, if you look at that team and everyone is just there to clock in, do the bare minimum, collect the paycheck, and go home, Munger would see that as a fundamental systemic fragility.
He would see it as a business built on sand.
Yeah.
The paycheck, the pleasure principle, is a very weak glue compared to the unbreakable bond of meaning. If your team is glued together only by money, a competitor can just offer them 10% more money, and your entire operation dissolves overnight.
So true.
But if your team is glued together by pillar 1, creating something of value, or pillar 2, a deep connection and respect for their colleagues, or pillar 3, a shared attitude of resilience toward the difficulty of the work, then that team is virtually unbreakable.
It is genuinely fascinating to see how a psychological truth forged in the darkest, coldest mud of a concentration camp becomes the bedrock principle for identifying a billion-dollar, highly resilient, modern enterprise.
Because truth is fractal. A fundamental truth about human nature applies at every level of existence.
Right.
It applies whether you are fighting for your life in the snow or fighting for market share in a boardroom. The context changes, the stakes change, but the core human operating system remains exactly the same.
Okay, this has been an incredibly deep journey. But knowing all this theory and knowing how Charlie Munger applied it to corporate capital allocation is only half the battle.
Yeah.
We have to bring this down to the ground floor. How do you actually implement this? How do you use this when you are facing the mundane, everyday trenches of your life?
This is the most important part of the discussion. Because the risk with discussing a masterpiece like Man's Search for Meaning is that it feels too big.
Like it belongs in a museum behind glass.
Right. You think, well, that's great for Viktor Frankl, but I'm just trying to get through my inbox.
No.
We need to reassure everyone that this book isn't just for navigating historical tragedies.
No, it directly applies to an average Tuesday morning. It applies to losing a promotion. It applies to a messy breakup. It applies to unexpected health challenges or crushing financial pressure.
The core, uncompromising message remains unchanged, regardless of the scale of the problem. You do not control what happens to you.
Right.
You do not control the economy, the illness, the traffic, or the actions of other people, but you absolutely fundamentally control your response. Your hands are always on the steering wheel.
So let's get deeply practical. How do we build a habit of keeping our hands on the wheel? We extracted a simple, highly actionable morning routine based directly on Frankl's material. This is a framework to help you actively identify and focus on finding meaning on a daily basis.
I love this because it operationalizes the philosophy. It turns abstract insight into daily, friction-reducing action.
The suggestion is that before you check your emails, before you open social media and let the world dictate your mood, before the whirlwind of the workday starts, you sit down with a cup of coffee and ask yourself 3 specific questions.
Okay,
And these questions map perfectly to Frankl's 3 pillars of meaning.
let's walk through them in detail. Question 1 maps to the first pillar, work and contribution. The question you ask yourself is, what am I creating right now?
And what I love about this is that it forces you to scale it to your current reality. You don't have to be painting the Sistine Chapel or founding the next Apple.
Not at all. On a macro level, maybe you are creating a new business. But on a micro level, today, maybe you are creating a well-organized spreadsheet that will help your entire team save 3 hours of tedious work. Maybe you are creating a healthy dinner for your kids. Maybe you are creating a small moment of order in a chaotic project.
Right.
By asking, what am I creating right now? You are forcing your brain to focus on your agency and your contribution. You are stepping out of the passive consumer mindset, which is entirely dependent on the environment, and into the active creator mindset.
You are claiming your agency.
Yes.
Question 2 maps to the second pillar, experience, encounter, and love. The question is, who am I connecting with?
This is a direct antidote to the isolation and transactional nature of modern life. It forces you to look outside your own internal anxieties.
Yeah.
Who are you going to actively encounter today? It could be being deeply, fully present with your partner over morning coffee rather than staring at your phone.
Oh, that's a big one.
It could be taking 5 minutes to mentor a junior employee who is struggling. It could be calling a friend you haven't spoken to in months. It shifts your focus from your own ego to the reality of other human beings. It grounds you in relationship, which Frankl proved is a massive source of survival energy.
And finally, question 3, which maps to the third most radical pillar, our attitude toward unavoidable suffering. The question is, what attitude am I choosing in the face of my current difficulty?
Notice the specific phrasing there. It doesn't ask, how can I quickly fix my difficulty today?
Right.
Some difficulties, chronic illness, grief, a terrible boss, you can't escape yet, they can't be fixed in a day. The question asks, what attitude am I choosing?
Wow.
This is the ultimate reclamation of power. It is keeping your hands on the steering wheel while sliding on the ice.
So if you're dealing with a toxic boss, you might consciously choose the attitude of, I'm going to use this person as resistance training in emotional regulation. I will not let them dictate my inner peace.
Exactly.
If you are dealing with a physical injury, you might choose the attitude of, I'm going to focus aggressively on what my body can still do, rather than spiraling about what it can't.
It's acknowledging the ice on the road, validating that the situation is difficult, but deliberately, stubbornly claiming your response.
It's brilliant. When I look at these three questions, to me, it's like calibrating your compass before you start walking into the wilderness.
That's a great way to put it.
You pull out the compass, you figure out where true north is. Now, even if the terrain that day is incredibly rough, even if you have to climb a steep mountain or wade through a freezing swamp, you don't get lost because you know your orientation.
Yeah.
These questions aren't just philosophical musings. They are practical daily anchors.
They're the diagnostic tools that ensure that no matter what the external environment throws at you, the internal engine of meaning continues to spark. They ensure you don't stall out.
Which brings us to the end of this deep dive. Let's synthesize this journey because we have covered a massive conceptual distance today.
We truly have. We started in the darkest, most unfathomable places imaginable, in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, where humanity was violently stripped to its absolute bare minimum.
And we traced a logical, mechanical line straight from that darkness to the brightly lit boardrooms of elite investors like Charlie Munger.
And the through line connecting those two extreme poles of human experience is Viktor Frankl's revelation. We learned that the search for meaning is not a luxury. It is not a secondary hobby you pursue on a weekend retreat when everything else in your life is perfectly sorted out. Meaning is the deepest, most fundamental human need. It is the absolute baseline engine of high performance, of resilience, and of ultimate survival.
Whether you're trying to survive the unimaginable or simply trying to build a career and a life that actually matters, the core mathematical truth is the same. Finding your why expands and manages your how.
Right.
When you have a deep, unshakable sense of purpose, you can endure almost any external pressure.
Because you realize, perhaps for the first time, that the ultimate freedom is never external. The environment will always do what it does.
Always.
The ultimate freedom is internal. It is the proactive agency to choose how you respond to the world.
We want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We started by talking about stripping an engine down to its core. Now, we want you to apply that directly to your own life as you go about the rest of your day.
Okay.
Building on Frankl's concept of everything being stripped away, I want you to mull over this thought experiment. If everything you physically own, the money in your bank account, and the title you currently hold at work were all stripped away from you tomorrow morning, what exactly would be the unshakable meaning left over that forces you to get out of bed the next day?
So friends, those were the powerful insights that can truly transform your life. Remember, growth doesn't come from the just listening, but from applying this lesson. If you want to get 1% better every day, make sure to subscribe and follow BYK Book Summary. I am Amin, and I will see you in the next episode with another incredible story. Until then, read more, think deeper, and live with meaning.